He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hello, everybody. Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811. 877-381-3811. We're going to talk a little bit this hour. I have a question to ask, talk about something that I think will both interest you and I think is important. I think most conservative intellectuals and think tanks do not actually conceive what has occurred in this country in terms of constitutional governance. They rarely talk about the Constitution. They almost never talk about solutions to the problem. They are perfectly happy operating within the box that the left has built. Massive bureaucracy, massive spending, massive debt and deficits, central government out of control, evisceration of big chunks of the Constitution. I don't think most conservative think tanks really have much to offer other than white papers about this piece of legislation or that piece of legislation. And as I try to read some of these so-called smart people in the conservative movement, they don't seem that smart to me. They want to know how we got Donald Trump. It's a fair question. I want to know how we got this government, which in so many ways operates outside our constitutional structure. I mean, I know how we got it, but they don't want to discuss it. And if you explain that a counter-revolution took place, as I've explained for years, that the American Revolution has been substituted with a counter-revolution, an administrative state, a bureaucracy, a handful of phony experts and professionals, a handful of politicians with an army of bureaucrats, thousands and thousands of laws, not passed by Congress but by bureaucrats, a court that is completely out of control, nationalizing issues, mandating issues, well beyond judicial review. You discuss these things. You write about these things. That is, I do. We discuss these things. They're either rejected or ignored or said to rabble-rouse. So I read the hand-wringers, I hear the hand-wringers, and I realize the vast majority of them are just that, hand-wringers and navel-gazers. You see, we can never get our Constitution back. We can never again emphasize the importance of the individual and unalienable rights if we do not fundamentally alter what the left has done in the last century. Doesn't mean things have to be done rashly or viciously or violently or anything of the sort. But we have to talk about and recognize what's taken place. And yet, in so many ways, these so-called conservative intellectuals and think tanks have been conquered as much as anybody else by the progressive statist movement. Now, I've been talking now for years about using the Constitution to restore the Republic. That shouldn't be a radical notion among conservatives. I've been talking now for years about the state legislatures. We do believe in federalism, right? We believe in the 10th Amendment, right? Well, that the state legislature should step up, act as a group, or a big enough group, and help us put in place measures that protect us from an overly powerful, centralized federal government that has no place in our constitutional scheme. And this is said to be radical. It's only radical if you accept what's happened in the last 100 years, this counter-revolution. Now, what I'm telling you is not speculation, it's not theory, it is absolute fact. It is a fact. And this is why we are so disappointed, not only with the deceit, the shameful deceit of Republicans we send to Washington, D.C., but because they won't address these matters of basic, fundamental, founding principles. They can never do anything effective. That's why you hear Republican-friendly surrogates in media. Well, we need to have the presidency to do X. We need to have presidency to do Y. Well, okay, let's give them that. So why do we need to have the presidency? Because the president now is far more powerful than the Constitution ever intended. The vast majority of legislating takes place in the executive branch, under the president. And I explained this the other day. The Democrat Party confers as much power to a Democrat president as possible. They're not interested in separation of powers. They're not interested in the Constitution. They're not interested in checking a Democrat's power. They're interested in expanding it and using the time that Democrat president has in office to make fundamental, irreversible changes to our country through the force of government. Not Republican government, iron-fisted, top-down, centralized administrative government. This is why you've lost so much faith in our governing institutions. It's easily explained. It has nothing to do with free market capitalism or trade. It has nothing to do with, our liberty and individualism or all these. That has everything to do with what's being done to you. With what's being done to you. And in that sense, of course, liberty and individualism. My only point in that regard is, it's not like we have too much liberty or too much individualism. We have too little. It's not like we have too much free market capitalism. We have too little. We haven't really had free market capitalism for over 100 years. Now, Clarence Thomas was at the Heritage Foundation today. And in part, here's what he had to say. Cut one, go.
Your thoughts on whether there's any hope to improve the confirmation process?
There's always hope, but this city is broken in some ways. I've been here now most of my life now, and I think that we have become very comfortable with not thinking things through and debating things. That's one of the things I love about the court. You can actually talk to people about things. And I think that we have decided that rather than confront the disagreements and the differences of opinions, we'll just simply annihilate the person who disagrees with me. I don't think that's going to work. I don't think that's going to work in a republic or in a civil society. And at some point, we have got to recognize that we're destroying our institutions and we're undermining our institutions. And we're going to destroy them, but the day's going to come, if it's not already here, when we need the institutions and the integrity of the institutions. So even when you disagree with people, if you notice in my opinions, I don't attack personally my colleagues. I disagree with them strongly because I think it's important for me to leave them standing and to leave the institution standing and to sharply have the contrast and the points of view. But I don't think that's going to change in the city until we get back to sort of a notion that we argue, that we debate, that we decide things based on logic and facts and reason, as opposed to who yells the loudest or who has the best narrative or best meme or some other nonsense.
You know, I agree with much of this, and I disagree with a little chunk of this. How do you reason with Black Lives Matter? How do you reason with a Supreme Court that turns the Constitution inside out when it comes to Obamacare or same-sex marriage or other issues? How do you reason with a bureaucracy we don't even know who to reason with? You see, part of the problem is that this change that's taken place over the last 100 years is not recognized. And that's why people are frustrated. And this isn't a matter of relativism, people arguing with each other, people not listening to each other. One side is advancing an agenda that is destructive of this country, and it will not take no for an answer. Another side's trying to stop it. And that side that's trying to stop it, us, we're losing. And we keep losing, even when we win elections. So I wish we could all sit on the Supreme Court and have reasoned debates and so forth and so on, but out in the streets, out in the communities, there's something that's already occurred that's extremely destructive. And in terms of undermining our institutions, these institutions, some of them, not all of them, have been undermining the civil society. You know, one of the great things about our founding is the tolerance for differences of opinion and different views. That's why we have states. That's why we have mobility. You don't like what's going on in New York? Maybe you move to Idaho or whatever. But when the central government imposes uniform requirements on every corner of the country, well, that's a problem. And one of the reasons we don't have as much civil debate and reasoning and logic going on as we should and we need is because when you change the rules, where one view is always superior to the other, and one view always has the force of law behind it against the other, reason and logic becomes very difficult. Let's go to cut 3, Mr. Producer. Go.
You said that the Constitution is not a standalone document and that it can really only be properly understood in combination with the Declaration of Independence. And I wonder whether you could elaborate on that.
Let me stop there. And in this, in my view, he's 100% correct. Go ahead.
You know, my point was that we have to understand why this was a question I was trying to answer in the mid-1980s. Why this government? Why this republic? Why isn't it something else? Why didn't we do what the French did? You know, and so I had to start with the Declaration, you know, the government by consent, inalienable rights, et cetera, and what were we protecting with the structure in our Constitution. And I think when you look at the Constitution, which is the positive document, with a declaration as a backdrop, you understand why this republic. Why is separation of powers so important? Why is federalism so important? Why are enumerated powers so important? Why a written constitution? Why is it so important? Because they're certain you gave up some of your rights in order to be governed, not all of them. And it's that limitation, the protection of that liberty. You know, I went back, I read a lot of Justice Scalia's separation of powers opinions this summer. And they all seem to come back to one theme: protecting individual liberty. It wasn't just to have separation of powers. It wasn't just to have federalism. It wasn't just to have enumerated powers. It was you had these in order to protect liberty. But where does that start? It starts in the Declaration.
That's exactly right. Was the point I was making the other day. It's the point I make in my books. The Declaration of Independence explains why we are a special country, because we embrace man's nature. That's what he's saying. So what's the purpose of the Constitution? The purpose of the Constitution is to create a governing environment that allows you to flourish, that allows you to evolve, that allows you to progress, that allows you mobility, that allows you liberty, that allows you security, that allows you justice, you, the individual, not the government, not the collective, you, the individual. And so if you don't understand the Declaration, you'll never understand the Constitution. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
So what do we do when the institutions of government are so perverted that we can't reach them through the ballot box? What do we do when so many decisions of government are made not through the will of the people, but through the will of a handful of masterminds? Whether they sit on the Supreme Court, whether they sit in the Oval Office, whether they sit in the bureaucracy, and even Congress. What do we do when the weakest of the three branches is the one that's supposed to represent we the people, Congress? What do we do when political parties confer as much power as they can on their president, and they could care less about separation of powers? What do we do when lawmaking takes place by people we don't even know, who we can never vote out of office, in the bureaucracy? What do we do when our individualism is under attack? What do we do when our property rights are under attack? I'm going to answer this as soon as you return.
Is the nation's town hall meeting, and you can join in at 877-381-3811.
There have been pieces written about conservatism and conservative intellectuals and how did they miss all this and what should they do by Ross Dutat over at the New York Times and Matthew Continetti and others, and yet they miss it. Very thoughtful pieces they write. What do we do about this populism? How did we miss it? Well, we didn't miss it. We the people. We the people. We didn't miss it. It's just that they live in such a cloistered social and intellectual environment that they're incapable of seeing it. They write to each other. They talk to each other. They write for each other. They try to impress each other. And so they miss it. They miss the genius of the founders of America. They miss the genius of the framers of the Constitution. They miss the genius of the ratifiers of the Constitution. I don't even know the last time they've read the Constitution, because many of them, I don't know about these two guys, many of them feel the Constitution is so passé as well. They have been enveloped by the progressivism of the last 100 years. I'm not saying they're part of it, I'm not saying they like it, but they're stuck in their box. They're stuck. Is this really the first time that if people have faced a situation like this? No, it's not. But it is difficult to deal with. When the elected branches of government confer power on unelected branches of government, power that the unelected branches of government are not supposed to have, and one branch of government isn't even necessarily supposed to exist, and you have a party system which is about self-preservation and little else, well, what are people to do? It's not like there's this populist movement that seeks to overturn the nation. It's that people are disgusted with what the government is doing, and they don't feel they have any say in it. And in many respects, they're right. Now, we're not a pure democracy. We don't have referenda and plebiscites and so forth, nor should we. But the representative branches aren't working. And I spent some time on this the other day. I'm not going to repeat it. We know why. Because that is the plan. That was the plan of Woodrow Wilson and John Dewey. And it turns out the progressive Republicans of the turn of the last century and so forth. And that's where we are. It's the plan of the Democrats. Just listen to Hillary Clinton. This is why I insist she must be defeated. By God, I don't care if you vote for a kumquat. She's got to be defeated. None of these people. I read the Dutat piece, the Continetti piece, really have a solution to all this. And, of course, there's not an easy solution to all this. But there's a direction. But they don't care about the direction. Or at least up to now, they haven't cared about the direction. So I would ask Mr. Dutat, Mr. Continetti, Mr. Crystal, Mr. this and that, Ms. this and that, to pay attention for a minute. Just for a minute. Well, maybe 15 minutes. And to think beyond your little cloistered operations. I live in several worlds, ladies and gentlemen. I live in the world of intellectual and scholarship. I live in the world of back to basics, down to earth. And so I write scholarly books. I'm a talk radio host. We launched Levin TV. These are the worlds I live in. And people say, well, how can you write with such scholarship and intellect? And on the radio, you're this, and on TV. These are worlds that meld one to the other. One to the other. Now, if you look at the book, The Liberty Amendments, you don't have to. I say, I undertook this project, restoring the American Republic, not because I believe the Constitution as originally structured is outdated and outmoded, requiring modernization through amendments, but because of the opposite. That is, the necessity and urgency of restoring constitutional republicanism and preserving the civil society from the growing authoritarianism of a federal leviathan. Shouldn't this pique Mr. Dutat and Continetti's interest? This is not doomsaying or fear-mongering, but an acknowledgement of fact. The statists have been successful in their century-long march to disfigure and mangle the constitutional order and undo the social compact. To disclaim the statist campaign and aims is to imprudently ignore the inventions and schemes hatched and promoted openly by their philosophers, experts, and academics, and the coercive application of their designs on the citizenry by a delusional governing elite. Their handiwork is omnipresent for all to see. A centralized and consolidated government with a ubiquitous network of laws and rules actively suppressing individual initiative, self-interest, and success, in the name of the greater good and on behalf of the larger community. Nearly all will be emasculated by it, including the inattentive, ambivalent, and disbelieving. The nation has entered into an age of post-constitutional soft tyranny. Alexis de Tocqueville explained presciently, quote, "It covers the surface of society with a network of small, complicated rules, minute and uniform, through which the most original minds and most energetic characters cannot penetrate to rise above the crowd." Mr. Dutton and Continetti, among others, this is hiding in plain view, as they say. It's not complicated. We know what's happening. We know what's taken place. De Tocqueville goes on. The will of man is not shattered, but softened, bent, and guided. Men are seldom forced by it to act, but they are constantly restrained from acting. Such a power does not destroy, but it prevents existence. It does not tyrannize, but it compresses, enervates, extinguishes, stupefies a people, till each nation is reduced to nothing better than a flock of timid and industrious animals, of which the government is the shepherd. That, boys, is the problem. Social engineering and central planning, this is me, are imposed without end, since the governing masterminds, drunk with their own conceit and pomposity, have wild imaginations and infinite ideas for reshaping society and molding man's nature in search of the ever-elusive utopian paradise. Their clumsy experiments and infantile pursuits are not measured against any rational standard. Their piousness and sanctimony are justification enough. De Tocqueville went on. It would seem as if the rulers of our time sought only to use men in order to make things great. I wish that they would try a little more to make great men, that they would set less value on the work and more upon the workman, that they would never forget that a nation cannot long remain strong when every man belonging to it is individually weak. He is responding before his time to what would come a half a century later. Woodrow Wilson, John Dewey, progressivism, statism. He said, and that no form or combination of social policy has yet been devised to make an energetic people out of a community of pusillanimous and enfeebled citizens. Get the point, Mr. Dutton? Mr. Continetti? Today, Congress operates not as the framers intended, but in the shadows, where it dreams up its most notorious and oppressive laws, coming into the light only to trumpet the genius and earnestness of its goings-on and to enable members to cast their votes. The people are left lame-brained and dumbfounded about their so-called representatives' supposed good deeds, which usually take the form of omnibus bills numbering in the hundreds, if not thousands, of pages, and utterly clueless about the effects these laws have on their lives. But, of course, that's the point. The public is not to be informed, but indoctrinated, manipulated, and misled. Congress also and often delegates unconstitutionally lawmaking power to a gigantic yet ever-growing administrative state that in turn unleashes on society myriad regulations and rules at such a rapid rate the people cannot possibly know of them either, and if by chance they do, they cannot possibly comprehend them. Nonetheless, ignorance, which is widespread and deliberately so, is no excuse for noncompliance, for which the citizen is heavily fined and severely punished. Not to be outdone, the current occupant of the Oval Office sees his primary duty as fundamentally transforming the United States of America. By this, of course, Obama did not mean a fresh allegiance to the nation's founding principles and a new respect for the Constitution's limits on federal authority, but the converse. He is more blatant and aggressive than his 20th century predecessors, but faithfully follows the footsteps of the most transgressive among them. The metamorphosis of the executive branch into an immense institution exercising a conglomeration of powers, including lawmaking and decreeing, is clearly without constitutional origin A quaint notion mostly derided these days. See, Mr. Dutton? See, Mr. Continetti? Maybe I should send them my books. Now, there's more to this. There's more to unraveling this. If people would only do it and stop navel-gazing. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
I don't know what qualifies one to be an intellectual or philosopher or whatever it is. But the conservative movement needs many more of them. And not just young guys who self-proclaim to be such, having gone to Ivy League schools or come out of think tanks or so forth. They're going to have to do better than they're doing right now, and they're doing very poorly. They need to be really serious thinkers. They really do. They need to stop trashing the people. They need to start to really take measure of what our government has become. They need to dig deeply into our history. And then they'll be able to draw some conclusions. Because right now they're swimming around aimlessly. They're doing the doggy paddle in the Atlantic Ocean. And it's unnecessary to do the doggy paddle in the Atlantic Ocean. There are rational things that can be done. But you got to break loose. You got to break loose from that which is limiting your ability to really think. You're stuck inside the box of the progressives. You're stuck inside the box of your little social cliques. And you really need to start to think outside the box. I don't mean be crazy kooky. I mean think outside of the limits you're placing on yourself. I would argue that's what makes the great intellectual or philosopher, who can really observe things, not as part of a gaggle or a group, but as an individual. And citing each other and saying how smart each other are and how brilliant each other's books are, that doesn't do anything. That just means there's 12 of you who agree with each other. You know, we have a wonderful advertiser here in CT shirts. Now, guys, we know how important it is to have well-fitted clothing for work or going out, and you don't want that baggy look around your stomach and arms. So what are your options? On one end, you have high-quality, stylish shirts, but they're ridiculously overpriced. On the other end, you've got affordable shirts, but they're out of style and they don't fit right, right? This is why you've got to check out Charles Tyrrett, CT shirts. CT shirts. These are the best shirts I've got. I've got them in my closet. They're the most exquisitely crafted, crease-free shirts, period. They're British styled. They use the softest, most comfortable fabrics, tie or no tie, tucked or untucked. You're going to look great in a CT shirt. Now check out this deal that I got for you. One CT shirt normally costs $100, but right now, listen, you'll get 3 shirts for $99. One's normally $100. You get 3 for $99. That's 60% off. The CT shirts come with free delivery. Now listen to this. A 6-month quality guarantee and free returns. Free delivery, a 6-month quality guarantee, and free returns, and you're getting 60% off. $99 gets you 3 amazing CT shirts. But look, you got to act on this. Christmas is coming, Hanukkah's coming, Thanksgiving coming, maybe somebody's birthday, but maybe you just need some nice shirts. I want you to check this out, really. Go to ctshirts.com/Levin. ctshirts.com/Levin. One more. That's ctshirts.com/Levin. Levin. I know you're going to love these shirts. I love these shirts. I don't typically like wearing dress shirts. I wear these shirts, and I like wearing these shirts. They look really good. They're really comfortable. Check them out. I got you a very good price on these when I was talking to these folks, so I think you'll really like them. Well, I said 15 minutes. We're going to carry this over to the next hour. You'll read book after book after book, column after column after column. You'll hear commentator after commentator after commentator trying to describe what's going on in this country. Conservatives. Pseudo-conservatives in many cases. It's repetitious almost. But they never seem to get to the nub of the matter, do they? They never seem to get to the nub of the matter. You got to go below the surface. You got to go below the superficial. It's not enough to bang the table and go on about Obama, even though that's necessary. It's not enough to bang the table and go on about the impotent Republicans, although that's necessary. If we're truly going to understand what has happened to this country and what our fate will be if we don't take the effective, necessary, long-term steps to reverse course and restore the Republic, then we're not going to reverse course or restore the Republic. I don't give a damn who's elected President of the United States. So I hope you'll stick with me. You know, I could jump up and down here and talk about meatballs and try and be provocative. I'm really not interested in that. Stick with me, hour two. I want to continue in this vein with you. I'll be right back.
He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hello, everybody. Mark Levin here. Hour two. Our number, 877-381-3811. 877-381-3811. You are listening to the smartest radio show in America, thanks to you, the smartest audience in America. So what do we do about this situation that we have in our country? I hope you heard most of the first hour, because I can't go back and do it again. Many of you have lost faith in the institutions, and for good reason. You're tired of being bullied, and you're tired of your vote not counting, and you're tired of bureaucrats, and you're tired of being lorded over by left-wing politicians. You're tired of being lied to by Republican politicians. You're tired of your most sacred issues, so-called social issues, being decided by liberals on the Supreme Court. I know, because I'm one of you. Let me pick up where I left off last hour. The Liberty Amendments. So having delegated broad lawmaking power to executive branch departments and agencies of its own creation, contravening the separation of powers doctrine, Congress now watches as the President inflates the congressional delegations even further and proclaims repeatedly the authority to rule by executive fiat in defiance of or over the top of the same Congress that sanctioned the domineering executive branch in the first place. Notwithstanding Congress's delinquency, but because of it, an unquenched President Obama, in a hurry to expedite a societal makeover, has repeatedly admonished Congress that if it won't act soon to protect future generations, I will, quote unquote. That is, if Congress will not genuflect to his demands and pass laws to his liking, he will act on his own. And Obama has made good on this refrain. On a growing list of matters, he has in fact displayed an impressive aptitude for imperial rule, with the help of a phalanx of policy czars from immigration, the environment, and labor law to health care, welfare, and energy. He has exercised his executive quote-unquote discretion to create new law, abrogate existing law, and generally contrive ways to exploit legal ambiguities as a means to his ends. He has also declared the Senate in recess when it was not, thereby bypassing the Senate's constitutional advice and consent role to install several partisans in top federal posts. Today, this is glorified and glamorized as compassionate progressivism. The framers called it despotism. Federalist 48. James Madison, considered the father of the Constitution, wrote, quote, "An elective despotism was not the government we fought for, but one which should not only be founded on free principles, but in which the powers of government should be so divided and balanced among several bodies of magistracy, as that no one could transcend their legal limits without being effectually checked and restrained by the others." And yet, it is this very principle, the core of our constitutional system, that has been all but eviscerated by the progressive movement, as I discussed with you the other day. Can't have divided government, checks and balances, federalism and all, and do good for the community, now can we? The third branch of the federal triarchy, the judiciary, is no better. Among the biggest myths is that the men and women of the judiciary, operating under monk-like conditions, would dutifully and faithfully focus their undivided mental faculties toward preserving the Constitution. They would apply their expertise, experience, and insight free from the political pressures and biases of elections and the legislative and executive branches of government, and with a narrow scope of authority and purpose. Moreover, it was assumed there was little to fear from this part of the government. Just read Federalist 78, written by Alexander Hamilton. Yet having seized for itself in the early years of the nation the final word on all matters before it, the Supreme Court, with just 5 of its 9 members, can impose the most far-reaching and breathtaking rulings on the whole of society, for which, we are told, there's no effective recourse. Turns out that justices are also God's children, and being of this world, their makeup consists of actual flesh and blood. They're no more noble or virtuous than the rest of us. And in some cases, less so, as they suffer from the usual human imperfections and frailties. And the court's history proves it. In addition to delivering the routine and, in some cases, exceptional rulings, the court is responsible for several notorious holdings, including Dred Scott versus Sanford, endorsing slavery, Plessy versus Ferguson, affirming segregation, Korematsu versus United States, upholding the internment of Americans, among others. During the last 80 years or so, the justices have rewritten sections of the Constitution, including the Commerce Clause, redefining non-commerce as commerce, the tax provisions, redefining penalties as taxes, to accommodate the vast expansion of the federal government's micromanagement over private economic activity. And the justices have laced the court's jurisprudence with all manner of personal policy preferences relating to social, cultural, and religious issues, many of which could have been avoided or deferred. What was to be a relatively innocuous federal government operating from a defined enumeration of specific grants of power has become an ever-present and unaccountable force. It is the nation's largest, and I put this in almost every book, it is the nation's largest creditor, debtor, lender, employer, consumer, contractor, grantor, property owner, tenant, insurer, health care provider, and pension guarantor. And with aggrandized police powers, what it does not control directly, it bans or mandates by regulation. For example, the federal government regulates most things in your bathroom, laundry room, and kitchen, as well as the mortgage you hold on your house. It designs your automobile and dictates the kind of fuel it uses. It regulates your baby's toys, crib, stroller, plans your children's school curriculum and lunch menu. It administers the student loans in college. At your place of employment, the federal government oversees everything from the racial, gender, and age diversity of the workforce to the hours, wages, and benefits paid. Indeed, the question is not what the federal government regulates, but what it does not. And it makes you wonder, how can a people incapable of selecting their own light bulbs and toilets possess enough competence to vote for their own rulers and fill out complicated tax returns? The illimitable regulatory activity with which the federal government torments, harasses, and coerces the individual's private and economic behavior is the progeny of a colossal federal edifice with inexhaustible energy for societal manipulation and change. In order to satisfy its gluttonous appetite for programmatic schemes, the federal government not only hurriedly digests the Treasury's annual revenue, funded with confiscatory taxes on a diminishing number of productive citizens, but deserts on the wealth not yet created by generations not yet born, with unconstrained indebtedness. And what havoc has this wrought? The federal government consumes nearly 25% of all goods and services produced every year by the American people. Yearly deficits routinely exceed $500 billion and typically $8 trillion. The federal government has incurred fiscal operating debt of nearly $20 trillion, far exceeding the total value of annual economic wealth created by the American people, which is expected to reach about $26 trillion in a decade. It has accumulated unfunded liabilities for entitlement programs exceeding $200 trillion. There's not enough money on the planet to make good on the federal government's financial obligations. So the Federal Reserve Board has swung into action with multiple versions of quantitative easing, which is nothing more than the federal government monetizing its own debt, that is, buying its own debt, with a combination of borrowing, issuing itself credit, printing money amounting to trillions of dollars. Of course, this has the eventual effect of devaluing the currency, fueling significant inflation or deflation, and eventually destabilizing an economy, which destabilizes a society. But like the laws of physics, there's no escaping the laws of economics. As these fiscal and monetary malpractices escalate, for there's no end in sight, the federal government will turn increasingly reckless and demanding, taking an even harder line against the individual's accumulation of wealth and retention of private property. And you can hear it in Hillary Clinton's campaign, can't you? The individual's liberty, inextricably linked to his private property, is submerged in the quicksand of a government that is aggregating authority and imploding simultaneously. You listening, Mr. Duterte, Mr. Continetti, et al.? What then is the answer? Well, Tocqueville again offers some guidance. Looking back at the Constitutional Convention some 50 years afterward, he observed, "It is new in history of society to see a great people turn a calm and scrutinizing eye upon itself when apprised by the legislature that the wheels of its government are stopped, to see it carefully examine the extent of the evil, and patiently wait 2 whole years until a remedy is discovered, to which it voluntarily submitted without its costing a tear or a drop of blood from mankind." He's talking about elections in the House of Representatives. But we're beyond that now, aren't we? And so I ask, is it asking too much of today's governing masterminds and their fanatical adherents to reform the product of their own fatuity? That is, the continuing disassembly of the Constitution and society? After all, despite one credible source after another, both within and outside the federal government, ringing alarm bells about the nation's hazardous track, describing it as unsustainable, desperate, and immoral, they are blinded to reason, Mr. Justice. They are blinded to reason and experience and knowledge by their political DNA and ideological invincibility, and therefore are intransigent to effective ameliorative steps. They long ago renounced by word and action their adherence to the Constitution's confinements, since the status utopia in the framers' Constitution can never coexist. But it is not asking too much of a great people to turn a calm and scrutinizing eye upon itself and rally to their own salvation. It is time to return to self-government, where the people are sovereign and not subjects, and can reclaim some control over their future rather than accept an inevitable and dismal fate. Unlike the radicalism of the governing masterminds who self-servingly oversee a century-old perpetual counter-revolution against the American dawn, the people must have as their goal the reestablishment of the founding principles and the restoration of constitutional republicanism, thereby nurturing the individual and preserving the civil society. This requires first an acknowledgement of the federal government's unmooring from its constitutional foundation. Second, an acceptance that the condition is urgent and, if untreated, will ultimately be the death knell of the American Republic. Third, the wisdom to rebalance the government in a way that is without novelty and true to the framers' original purpose. And fourth, the courage to confront, intellectually and politically, the status' stubborn grip on power. There is a path forward, but it requires an enlightened look back at our founding. And what we find is the framers rightly insisted on preserving the prominent governing role of the state legislatures as a crucial mechanism to containing the power of the proposed new federal government. In fact, other than the limited specific powers granted to the federal government, the states retain for themselves plenary governing authority. Even a cursory look at the debates points that out. What are you talking about, Mark? Conservatives are supposed to believe in federalism. Conservatives are supposed to believe in the decentralization of government. Conservatives are supposed to believe in limited, enumerated federal powers. Conservatives are supposed to believe in the 10th Amendment's language and intent. And yet, these so-called intellectual conservatives clearly do not. And yet, these so-called conservative think tanks clearly do not. They do not trust the state legislatures. They do not trust the people in the states, despite decades of propaganda to the contrary. Because all they have to do is read what the framers and the ratifiers put in the Constitution. Article 5, the Convention of States. Mr. Dutat, Mr. Continetti, perhaps they've written about it. I'm unaware of it. Perhaps they've given it more than a minute's thought. I doubt it. How about the others? How about the other self-appointed intellectuals and scholars of the conservative movement? Where's Charles Murray? Where's Victor Davis Hanson? Where's Charles Krauthammer? Where are they? They're inside the box. They refuse to consult the Constitution. I'm not attacking them. I'm just telling you the truth, having been behind this issue now for years. Because otherwise they have no answer. They have no recourse. There is no solution. Because the tide in this case is always going out. It's always going out. And so as the conservative intellectuals wonder how conservative intellectuals miss what's taking place, maybe they ought to listen a little bit more attentively rather than denounce talk radio, at least this talk show. And maybe they ought to do a little bit more reading and a little less propagandizing. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Adversity, ladies and gentlemen. Adversity brings out the best of the best people, doesn't it? It's easy to go along when things are going along swimmingly. Adversity brings out the best. I said, I know you because I'm one of you. It's true. I guess I'm wealthier than most of you, but I don't live a life like that. I don't. Typically, when I'm not on the air, I'm visiting my parents in Florida or my kids in California. Typically. I'm not going to talk about myself, but there are things that can be done. Term limits for members of Congress, term limits for Supreme Court justices, limits on federal spending and taxation and borrowing, limits on the federal bureaucracy, limits on what can be done to interfere with free market capitalism, private property rights ensured, and many other things. We just have to do it through our state legislatures.
If Mark has banned you from the show, we have a special number you can call to reach him, 877-381-3811.
By the way, we have a brand new liberal number, too, don't we, Mr. Producer? 877-381-3811 for liberals. 877-381-3811. Only liberals can call that number. You know, folks, whatever aging gracefully means to you, just listen to what Darlene W. from Loosedale, Missouri says. She says, I heard about it on the radio. The results on my fine lines and even deep forehead wrinkles were dramatic. I get compliments all the time. It's like I never aged. And Darlene's talking about the new Esotique XV anti-wrinkle cream enhanced with plant stem cell technology and powerful natural peptides. Now, that's the cutting edge of anti-wrinkle science. The plant stem cell formula combats chronological aging, wrinkles, fine lines, and UV damage that can cause skin redness. And yes, it works for men and women, by the way. It's not just Darlene. My mom uses Esotique XV. She loves it. And she's not the only one in my family who uses it, by the way. So for a limited time, you can try Esotique XV for yourself, absolutely free, for a full 30 days. You can't beat this. Now, the results will blow your mind, or you simply don't pay. For your free 30-day trial, call 800-SKIN-604. That's 800-SKIN-604. Call now. You'll also get the Deep Firming Vitamin C Serum as a free gift just for trying Esotique XV today. They are standing behind their product, and they know you're going to love it. Call 800-SKIN-604 or go to xvbeauty.com. That's xvbeauty.com. That's 800-SKIN-604, 800-SKIN-604, or xvbeauty.com. That's wonderful. Mike Pence has asked to come on the program, and he's on a plane, and when he lands, we will accommodate Mike Pence, who's an old buddy of mine. And we'd be very excited about having him on. We have Ben Shapiro, who's a young buddy of mine. He'll be coming on the program. What time is it, Mr. Producer? I forget. He'll be coming on the bottom of the next hour, the final hour. There's a book he's written that he wanted to talk about. That'll be fun, too. And so we are full of stuff. Chris, Baltimore, Maryland, the great WCBM. Go.
Hi, Mark. Thank you so much for taking my call.
Yes, sir.
I use the conservative line, by the way.
Yes,
Never
thank
dial
you.
into the liberal line. I'll get right to my point. You've laid it out so perfectly well in the Liberty Amendments for these so-called smart guys in the think tanks and in the pseudo-conservative media.
Well, notice how they ignore it.
They ignore it, Mark. It's weird. I think part of it is because they just like to sit there and whine and moan and be the smart guys because they're getting their bread.
I'm starting to think there's something to this. I never did, but how you can completely ignore the framers of the Constitution, the ratifiers of the Constitution, a section of the Constitution that is sitting there for the state legislatures and just keep wringing your hands about, whoa, we conservative intellectuals got it wrong. What can we conservative intellectuals do? Oh, look at this. We need to embrace it. That is almost a willing ignorance as far as I'm concerned.
It is, because I think financially it's, they're getting taken care of fine, but what about the rest of the American people? And I'll tell you, Mark, this is my concern, and you've talked about this. We're seeing what were once solidly red states turning purple, and due in large part to this diabolical administration. But also you've got northeastern liberals migrating to these red states to flee the very policies that they continue to support at the ballot box. It's ironically so. My concern is that the Liberty Amendment, so Article 5 Convention of the States, we have a chance now. But the longer we wait and the more these states, these red states turn purple, I'm afraid we're going to start losing.
I agree with you. Now, let me ask you this. If we cannot rely on state representatives and state senators, which is fundamental to the whole notion of constitutional governance, the 10th Amendment and so forth, and federalism, if we are so fearful of the state legislatures, then why are we conservatives? Why do we play this game? Then we must support centralized government. We just want less of it. Well, that's never going to happen. The government's not going to restrain itself in Washington. Is there any evidence of that whatsoever?
No, not at all.
Well, then we lost. It's over. The republic's dead. I mean, these people who surrender, who reject the only available constitutional recourse that exists, I don't know what they have in mind.
Well, Mark, I think you've talked about it before. Maybe it's not in their best in their own interest for their own.
Well, let's put all that aside. The inferring financial things and so forth. Let's put that aside. I think there's an intellectual laziness. I think there is an insular attitude. Really, I do. And I think a lot of these guys and gals have been conquered by the very progressive movement they claim to oppose. And so they only think in terms of the federal government. Will the federal government give the states X? Will the federal government allow the states to do Y? Will this happen or that? No. No, there are other ways to address this. And it would be nice if they got behind it. I mean, we have the governor of the biggest Republican state in the Union, Texas, who's 100% on board. We have the former senator from Oklahoma, Mr. Fiscal Responsibility, Tom Coburn, who is on board. We have intellectuals and non-intellectuals on board. But most of all, we have the very men who met in Philadelphia at the Constitutional Convention on board. Are we smarter than them? They said, hey, we're going to put in here an alarm, an emergency alarm, where the people, through the state legislatures, can address abuses of the federal government. And by the way, George Mason, who came up with the language, also said to avoid violence. All right, my friend, thank you for your call. Let us go to Lee, Buffalo, New York, the great WLKW. Go.
Mark, I'm a good long-time listener, but I'm a socialist, registered socialist. I can send you my registration so you can believe me. But I have admiration for you. I think you have to start...
Where are you from originally, sir?
I'm originally from Iran.
Iran?
Yes.
And you're a socialist?
Yes, I am.
You don't believe in liberty, apparently.
Well, let's not talk about that because I didn't call you up. That's a lengthy discussion. If you desire, I can call you later in another show, but I want to stay with your subject.
All right, go ahead.
State right, and the government right. Nothing can be changed, Mark, till we put a term limit on our state legislators and our congressmen and senators.
Well, I'm not interested in putting term limits on or off state legislatures. The people in each state can make that determination.
Right, but...
I mean, if I could here in Virginia, I would, but there's no question, in my view, we need them as members of Congress. We haven't on a president because Roosevelt decided 4 terms were something he wanted to have, even though Washington had 2, and like a typical liberal, he violated our traditions and customs. But when the Constitution was written, the power was in the states. Nobody thought people would be in the House or the Senate forever. Moreover, 1850. In 1850, the average term of a congressman, that is, was one term. They served a term and they went home. Now it's a whole industry. It's an entire industry, an insider industry. When I started talking about this, thank you for your call, my friend, and do call back one day so we can debate socialism, particularly given where you come from. When I first talked about the outsiders and started talking about the establishment, I was attacked. What establishment, Mark? We're an establishment. Well, what's the establishment? George Will wrote a bit. Hey, there's no establishment, National Review. Well, what's the establishment? Now they know what we mean. Now the so-called intellectuals and scholars understand what we mean. So there is this establishment. Reagan talked about it too. Not only Reagan, the great philosophers talked about it. These people, the handful of people who want to lord over the population. Read Plato's Republic, as hard as it is for a lot of people. You know, people talk, I talked about this on Levin TV. People, Plato's Republic, now, that was a great book. They haven't read it. The Republic is a totalitarian regime. John Adams used to praise Plato's Republic, and then he actually read it one day and was shocked by what was in it. If you have an extra 4 or 5 hours and you want to take your time and read it, or an extra 4 and 5 days, you should. You can muscle through it, but I summarize it in Ameritopia. Khomeini was a big fan of Plato's Republic. I'm not talking about Plato per se, his Republic that he wrote about. And it has a relationship to Obamacare. They talk about the platinum, the gold, and the bronze people. Well, I think it's a kind of a sick joke that Obamacare has a gold plan and a silver plan and a bronze plan. I don't think it's a mistake that they used that code to define the kinds of plans that they have. Because these masterminds are of totalitarian mindsets. Whether it's Athens or Rome, all the way up to the United States. And great thinkers, going back to the beginning, have warned us about all of them. I guess what's so frustrating to somebody like me, who delves into this every night and every weekend, reading, studying, reading, because this is what I do for a hobby and I do for a vocation, is here we are in the greatest country ever devised by human beings. And it's slipping away. And you know it and I know it. It's slipping away. And we seem so impotent because they have, in many ways, breached our Constitution's firewalls and have bastardized so many institutions of government that Clarence Thomas is talking about. We're losing respect for them. The reason we're losing respect for them is they've lost respect for us. They're operating in ways that are not moored to the Constitution. And the idea that think tank after think tank has missed this, self-appointed intellectual after self-appointed intellectual in the conservative movement either has missed this or ignores this, is appalling to me. Absolutely appalling to me. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Well, we were contacted and asked if Mike Pence could come on the program between 7:30 and 8, and the problem is his plane is delayed. So that won't be happening, and perhaps he'll call in another day. We're trying to accommodate as many people as we can, as we come up to the end of this election. I had mentioned to you last week, I believe it was, that we invited Pat Toomey and they never got back to us. Well, they just did get back to us, and they apologized, and they would like to try and come on next week. So we're going to try and help here and there where we can. Tomorrow, Marco Rubio. He's 4 points ahead, but that's a tough race in Florida. And I'm just hoping we can at least hold the Senate. I'm hoping we can stop Hillary. But we need to have lines of defense. Listen, and I don't need lectures about how pathetic the Republicans are. I think I talk about that like every other night, or maybe every other hour. I got it. I really do. But this is where we are. Help me push Convention of States, Article 5. That's where I want to go. That's where I want to go. But here we are, 12 days before an election. What am I supposed to do? Just beat my chest and pretend I'm George Washington and trash everybody who disagrees with me? I'm not going to do it. What should I do? Go on some liberal guy's TV show and start attacking my colleagues? No, I'm not going to do that either. We'll do the best we can here. By the way, have you gotten Levin TV yet? Have you, even more, have you signed up for CRTV yet? We just launched the first conservative TV network. And we have started with my show, Levin TV. The incomparable Michelle Malkin will be doing a program on investigations, and Mark Stein, too. But those of you who go to crtv.com, you can see the sort of things we have planned. Those of you who have seen Levin TV, you know what we're doing. And by the way, if you have a Levin TV subscription right now, you don't have to do anything. Because whatever left you have on the annual subscription, I should say, whatever you have left on the annual subscription carries over to CRTV. And then when your annual subscription is over, then you can re-sign. So you can all relax. Those of you who do not have a subscription, we are now producing an entire network. And that network will be fully online in December. But if you pre-order now, you'll get a discount. All 3 shows, all year long. Not for 1 month, all year long. The discount is $89. The normal price is $99. And if you see Levin TV, you'll know what I'm talking about. So I hope you'll check it out. It's going to be absolutely wonderful. We're beginning something really big here, I think. In 7.5 months of Levin TV, we have done beyond what we could have imagined in terms of growing our community of conservatives and patriots who are worried about this country and are sick and tired, frankly, of the drama kings and queens on cable and the self-serving things that they say and their use of guests as foils and all that. We're not doing any of that, okay? This is about you, not about the host, things that might interest you. So we're pulling together some of the most talented, solid conservatives, many of whom you know, who are going to work very, very hard to give you the best content they possibly can. Now, Levin TV tonight, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, and you know where you are, whatever time that is. But you have to sign up. And what you can do is you can go to 844-LEVIN-TV. That number is still good. 844-LEVIN-TV. You can sign up immediately. You can give it as a gift. You can give it for Christmas or Hanukkah, but you have to get in now if you want to get the discount. It's the pre-ordered discounts. Just like books on Amazon, there's a pre-ordered discount. Or you can go to crtv.com. crtv.com. In fact, I would encourage you to go to crtv.com. What is it? /Levin? /Levin, right? Ah, such modern terms. crtv.com /Levin or call 844-LEVIN-TV. I want you to become part of this movement, and you're going to enjoy it. It's very entertaining with true blue conservatives. Different personalities, different approaches. And, you know, with all the static out there and all the bleakness out there, some of us are trying to punch through it. It's /Levin TV. Okay, so you go to crtv.com/Levin TV. crtv.com/Levin TV or 844 Levin TV. Go ahead and order now. You get the pre-order, you'll get the discount, and I promise you're going to enjoy it. You really are. And by the way, great Levin TV tonight, so check it out. All right, folks, we have a full hour left. One of my buddies, Ben Shapiro, will be on the program at the bottom of the next hour. And I want to take some of your calls. I'll be right back.
He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Well, that explains it. Mike Pence was a little busy during the last half hour. He couldn't come on the program because his campaign plane slid off the runway after landing at LaGuardia Airport. He's okay, according to NBC campaign embed. Emergency crews were on the site, no injuries. But I'll tell you, when they wrote us, they just said, we're sorry he's going to be delayed. They didn't even tell us about this. I'm just saying how understated they are. But we saw now that his campaign plane slid off the runway, and thankfully he's okay. Mike Pence is a great guy. I'm a huge fan of his, always have been. Now I have to fix something I messed up. And I hope the people are still listening who were listening the hour before. You can pre-order CRTV, get the $10 discount. So at the regular price in December 7th, when we launch, it'll be $99. You can get the pre-order CRTV price, the discounted price of $89. Here's what you have to do. This is the process. You go to crtv.com. That's crtv.com, conservativereviewtv.com, to sign up. When you check out, use the code Levin. That's Levin. When you use the code Levin, you'll get the $10 discount. So you go to crtv.com, you sign up, and as you check out, use the code. You'll be asked about it, Levin, Levin. Or just call them, 844-LEVIN-TV, 844-LEVIN-TV for assistance with your CRTV subscription, and you'll get the discount through them. So I hope you will join CRTV. It's our brand new conservative TV network. And also in December, let me just add this, because I failed to do so. If you have your smart TV, your Samsung smart TV, they have what's called a smart hub. Many of you know this already, where you can click right on an icon to watch a program. Well, guess what? We worked out with Samsung that CRTV will be one of the icons. It's very difficult to do, but it opens up a brand new avenue for all of you. So once you sign up, and then you'll have the what's called the Smart Hub. You'll have the various icons that pop up. You hit CRTV, and you watch us. Isn't that cool? That's really great. Samsung does a hell of a job. I'm very, very impressed with those folks. And we've been developing our software to do that for the last 3 months. That's one of the exciting things I've been wanting to tell you as well. So I hope you'll participate. All right, let's take some calls here. Unfortunately, my call screen is down again, dagnabbit. All right, Mr. Producer, what do you got? WGBF, William in Indiana, a Hoosier. A Hoosier. Nobody knows what a Hoosier is. I've been Googling it. There's 14 different explanations, but we just think it's a friendly term for people from Indiana. Yes, sir. Go right ahead.
Mark, in 1952, I was a freshman in high school, and my social studies teacher told me that once the bill goes to the Supreme Court after it's been passed by the House and the Senate and the President signs it, that if the Supreme Court rules it unconstitutional, it goes back to the House and then to the Senate again to see whether or not, or why it isn't constitutional. And I've been living under that idea for a long time.
Let me just clarify a little bit. The House and the Senate, they pass a bill. It's not a law till the president signs it. The president signs it. It doesn't go straight to the Supreme Court. The bill might be challenged. Over time, it may work its way to the Supreme Court if the Supreme Court takes up the case. But the Supreme Court is not per se involved in the legislating process, even though you have members on the court who think they're legislators. That's how it works. All right, my friend, thank you for your call. Next one, Mr. Producer. The great KSFO, Kathy in San Francisco. Go right ahead.
Hi, Mark. I actually called in on the conservative line, not the liberal line from San Francisco.
Yes, well, you know the difference, do you not?
I do.
Let me just repeat. 877-381-3811. That's the conservative line. And for you liberals, and we do like talking to you liberals, but we do like taking your calls, maybe, 877-381-3811. Go right ahead.
Thanks, Mark. Something else you said just a bit ago about the fear of everything slipping away. I'm a mother of 4. I grew up in Montana, been in Silicon Valley for the last 25 years. The last decade, we've lost our moral compass. And our leaders, people that we trusted to watch over us and care for us and make the right decision, for some reason they've fallen silent. And I've tried to assess it and understand, is it the uber left that's holding us completely hostage? Living in the Valley, I see all the tech companies and the media execs and what appears to be all the establishment politicians are all on the other side or against us. And
I'll tell you. Let me just tell you before we come to a hard break here, Kathy. This movement that I talk about, and I'm not unique in this regard, this movement I talk about that's been going on for more than a century, it didn't just attack the governing system and the Constitution. It attacked the culture. And as these guys wrote, and there were many of them at the time, a guy by the name of Seeger, among others, a guy by the name of Dewey, a guy by the name of Wilson, a slew of them. These pseudo-intellectuals and leftists, they made it quite clear we need to change our educational system. Dewey is famous for this. We need to change our thinking processes. We need to change the way Americans think about America. This has been an ongoing project, day in and day out, and we've been caught, standing on our heels, and this has been going on decade after decade after decade. Which is why I keep banging the pots and pans about this, which is why I write what I write. And I'm writing another book on the subject at some great length. And that's just why I don't waste time behind my microphone talking about mark, meatballs. Because really 3 hours isn't enough. One program isn't enough. But the American people have had this done to them. I keep hearing, you get what you vote for. That's not true even anymore. Who voted for same-sex marriage? Who voted for this bathroom rule? Who voted for the EPA to do what the EPA does? Who votes for all these things? Who voted for the Supreme Court to do what it did in the Obamacare case? I get you get what you vote for. Well, to some extent it's true, but we get an awful lot that we don't vote for too, don't we?
Amen. And I feel like we mothers need to hold hands. Where is the female voice? Not the feminist angry voice. The female voice that is worried about education and health care and common decency and core values. And I honestly have been on the Trump team for 16 months merely because living in California, I knew in my heart of hearts, even though I love Ted Cruz, he could never win because we've slipped so far south.
I strongly disagree with you in that regard.
I'm hoping that Trump can pull us up some. I'd love to see Ted on the Supreme Court.
Well, Ted is not going to be on the Supreme Court because he doesn't want to go on the Supreme Court. And do you honestly think, even if the Republicans control the Senate, that Mitch McConnell would bend a finger for Ted Cruz to be on the Supreme Court?
I just hope that there would be enough pressure against him.
No, it's not going to happen. All right, Kathy, I appreciate your call. Let me slip in one more quickly here. Larry, trucker, Oklahoma, Sirius Satellite. How are you, sir?
Mr. Levin, it's a pleasure. It is a pleasure.
Thank you, sir.
You opened my eyes up. I was ready to open my eyes 2 years ago and a couple of weeks into it, and I listened to you. And now I can't get everything out of my head. Everything is, you see it. You see it when you going into a store. You see it when you talk to people. You see just ugliness. And Miss Cassie that was just on there with you, you know, she said a lot of what everybody sees. I talked to so many people throughout the course of my week driving back and forth, and these are Trump people. I was rooting for Cruz, and I wanted him to get it so bad. The rest of America didn't think that he had it, and now it's just a matter of never Hillary. But you, sir, you helped me. You opened my eyes. I'm a Hispanic male. You know, I never really gave too much thought until I became a grandfather, and
that'll do it, won't it?
Oh my goodness, will it ever? I just got my son, my youngest son, a copy of the Declaration of Independence from Hillsdale College with the amendments, and we've been looking at it and reading it and trying to commit it to memory, and that's on you. I appreciate you for everything that you've done and everything that you're continuing to do. And
listen, Larry, you're a great guy. Let me ask you something. Would you like to be the very first caller into this program who gets an annual subscription free for CRTV?
I would be honored.
All right. Don't hang up, Larry. There's our inaugural caller for CRTV, Larry. That'll be great. All right. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Well, that campaign plane Mike Pence was on, apparently, well, that was not a very easy landing, and it did slide off the runway, and apparently nobody's hurt, including Mike Pence, so that's good. Got my buddy Ben Shapiro on the program. How are you, Ben?
Hey, doing pretty well. How are you, Mark?
Doing very, very well. Well, you have this new book out called True Allegiance. It comes out next week, as I understand. Tell everybody about this book, because it's fairly compelling.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it's a novel, and it's basically take everything that's happening in America and ratchet it by about 25%. And the idea is, what does the dissolution of America actually look like? So it's got a bunch of storylines that we follow: an inner city exploding into chaos with the President of the United States trying to use that chaos for his own political benefit. It's got a border crisis in Texas. It's got a rancher in California who's attempting to stand up to overweening federal authority. And meanwhile, America collapsing across the sea with terrorists attempting to attack us, and a president who's more interested in securing his own legacy than anything else. It sounds a lot more realistic about what's going on today than it was when I wrote it. When I wrote it a year and a half ago, I thought I was predicting 10 years in the future, and now it seems like it may be about 10 minutes from now. So, read it while it's still fiction before it's history, I guess.
So there are strains of truth in this, then, from your perspective.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, the idea here, the reason I wrote it as fiction and not as nonfiction is because what the left loves to do is they love to accuse people on our side of cherry-picking the facts and, oh, the statistics you're using are twisted. And if you tell a story, then it makes it very hard for the left to argue with a story. It's using the methods of the left against themselves. The left likes to tell us stories, and then we argue that the story isn't a true portrayal of reality. And they say, well, of course it's not. It's fiction. You know, you either buy it or you don't. Well, if we use the same method against them, if we kind of paint a picture for people who are in the middle on the left, here's what America is going to look like if we don't re-enshrine all those founding principles that you talk about, Mark, then this is what it's going to look like. Sometimes you can convince people better that way, the same way that Atlas Shrugged did more for capitalism than probably Milton Friedman did, because more people have read Atlas Shrugged than Milton Friedman. I'm sort of hoping the same thing happens in terms of fiction here, that we start to look at some of the serious issues that confront the country, but maybe we're brought there by an exciting thriller wrapping as opposed to just another nonfiction book.
And that book is True Allegiance. It's out next week. We're going to link to it. You can get it on Amazon. And they always discount it before it comes out, so now's the time to act. You know, as you talk about this, it could also be a movie script, don't you think?
I mean, I would hope at some point.
Yeah, you'd love that, but I mean, seriously.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Break it in, but beyond that, you know, obviously that would take Hollywood having a change of heart. They prefer to make movies about America falling apart where the Republicans are the bad guys, where the conservatives are the bad guys. You know, in this particular iteration, it's really a combination of Americans not knowing what America's about, a president who's more interested in personal glorification and power, and a foreign policy that's collapsing in on itself because we failed to recognize that a strong America abroad is necessary in order to protect Americans here at home. And I think it really does ask the question. The reason I call it True Allegiance is that's the oath that officers take in the military, and the main character is a guy named Brett Hawthorne, the youngest general in the Army, and he's sort of the hero. But the idea is that we all, I think, all Americans at this point have to determine what is our allegiance to. Is it to party? Is it to a politician? Is it to our family? Is it to principle? And what are the principles that we have to fight for? And what if those things come into conflict? What if your allegiance to the president comes into conflict with your principles? What if the allegiance to party and to friendship comes into conflict with the principles you hold most dear?
Now, in addition to writing this, you run a website called The Daily Wire, which is an excellent website. You write a column, pretty much, right? Rather frequently.
Oh, yeah, right. 4 times a day for Daily Wire, once a week for a National Review syndicated column, yeah.
And you wrote a piece that's up at National Review now, National Review Online, where you're saying never Trumpers and reluctant Trumpers better damn well make peace after this election. Explain that.
Yeah, I think that the greatest danger that I see after this election, whether Trump wins or loses, is this Republican civil war that some people desperately want to happen. I'm not talking about a cleansing that needs to happen of people who don't understand conservative principle. I'm talking about the idea that everything has to be burned down. Who are we going to blame for Trump losing? Is it the never-Trumpers, or is it people who nominated Trump? We're all going to go to war with each other as opposed to going to war with the left's agenda. And what needs to happen here, and what I sort of say is we need to understand that people who may disagree with you about Trump may have the best of intentions. If we don't at least acknowledge that they have the best of intentions in terms of trying to fight the left, then we're not going to be able to come together. One of the things that I've thought that's ugly, and it's happened on both sides, is people who are never Trump. Because I'm a person who's not planning to vote for Trump. The people who are not planning to vote for Trump, some of them have taken this kind of moral superiority, high horse position, where if you're voting for Trump, you're doing something deeply immoral. Look, I don't think you're doing something deeply immoral at all. I totally understand the logic. I find it compelling. The only reason that I'm not following it is because I have a different risk calculation about what a Trump presidency would do, and also about what backing Trump and then him losing would do. But never Trumpers have to acknowledge that people who are voting for Trump to stop Hillary are right morally. They're not doing anything wrong morally. And by the same token, people who are voting for Trump to stop Hillary have to see that not all never Trumpers are created equal. There's some people who are not voting for Trump because they actually wouldn't vote for Ted Cruz. And then there's some people who are not voting for Trump because they look at Trump and they say, this guy is poisoning the well with a lot of constituencies we're going to need. And beyond that, he's enabled a lot of elements within the party that have nothing to do and actually fight constitutional conservatism. Plus, there is the fact that if he gets in and he ends up being a bad president and there's a recession, then in 4 years we're looking at somebody far to the left getting in for another 8, and we lose the Senate and House in 2018. So these are real considerations, and I'm not suggesting you have to come down on one side or the other, but I am suggesting that on November 9th, if we don't understand that we're on the same side, then everybody who does not care that much about constitutional conservatism gets what they want. People who want to make money off of the battle, the people who want to make hay, people like Hillary Clinton who want to make hay out of us tearing ourselves apart. Again, that doesn't mean that we can't look at people and say, who told us the truth, who didn't.
Ben, I want to carry over. Don't hang up. I want to carry over at the bottom of the hour. A few more questions to ask you. The book is True Allegiance. You can get it at Amazon.com. Just go to my social sites. I'll be right back.
Just in time for Halloween, the Harry Reid and Nancy Pelosi nightmare continues. With Mark Levin. Call in now at 877-381-3811.
Well, that's an old one. All right, we have as our guest Ben Shapiro. The book is True Allegiance. Now, Ben, I just want to get this straight. How old were you when you graduated college?
I was 20 when I graduated UCLA.
You were 20?
Mm-hmm.
Because you and I have a similar path here. Are you aware of that?
I was aware of some of it, yeah. I mean, you're one of the few guys in the media.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
You know, you're one of the few guys in the media that I think of as, highly, highly intelligent. There's some who aren't.
Okay, thank you. But you went into college, though. You were 16 at the time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fabulous. And you got out of law school. How old were you?
I was 23 when I graduated from Harvard.
Yeah. And then you did what? You got into the media immediately?
Well, I worked at a law firm for 10 months, decided I hated it, and quit.
Yeah,
and
I know that.
Yeah. And then I went to work for, actually, a radio company as in-house counsel and did some production for them. And I'd been writing, I had a syndicated column since I was 17, so I'd been doing a lot of this for a long time.
Yeah. And you're how old now? I know. I want everybody to know.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm 32 now.
You're 32, and you run your own website, which is really a go-to website, the Daily Wire. You write for it 4 times a week. You write for National Review. You're a radio host. What stations are you on?
So we're on KRLA in Los Angeles, and then I've got a podcast, the Ben Shapiro Show, that's available on iTunes and SoundCloud, and the rest of those downloadable areas.
Yeah. So, you're really getting out there. I think you're making a difference. And so let me ask you this. I know what you think about Trump, which isn't much. What do you think about Pence?
I think Mike Pence is fine. I think that Pence was a very good congressman. I had my quibbles with him, and they were not insignificant about how he treated the Religious Freedom Restoration Act in Indiana. But I think overall, I really don't have a problem with Mike Pence. I think he's a good conservative guy.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's hard to get them much more conservative than Pence, right? I get the religious liberty issue.
Yeah, again, I thought that he was a really, really good congressperson. I was talking him up as presidential material like 5-6 years ago. And again, the only area of disagreement that I can see with Mike Pence, aside from just some Trump stuff, is how is sort of him backing down in Indiana and the RFRA.
Which was significant. I agree with you. That was significant. Okay. Well, listen, I wish you all the best of luck on this book. It'll be a great novel for those of you who want to read it. True Allegiance. It's out next week. You can get it on Amazon.com. Go to Mark Levin Show Facebook, Mark Levin Show Twitter. I link to it right there, and good luck to you.
Well, Mark, as you know, I couldn't respect anybody more than I respect you, and I really appreciate it.
Well, likewise. God bless you. I'm trying to get him on Levin TV, by the way. Don't tell anybody. On CRTV. On CRTV. But he's his own entrepreneur. I think we got a lot of very sharp, young conservatives out there. He's one. You got Daniel Horowitz, our guy over at the Conservative. There are many, and I shouldn't start naming names. There are really many. I'm very excited about the next generation of conservatives. Less excited about the current generation of conservatives. But I think we have a lot of truly sharp young men and women who are fighters and who are activists. They remind me of me, actually. Just kidding. Not really. Gun lovers, I want you to listen. Did you enter to win your dream gun from the USCCA yet, the United States Concealed Carry Association? This is a great group. If not, I wouldn't wait any longer. You're about to run out of time. The deadline, midnight on Halloween. When is Halloween? Monday? Yes, midnight Monday, so you need to act. Now, 10 of you will each win $1,500 to spend on any gun you want. And you can be one of the people that you can purchase a certain type of weapon that you might like. For instance, a Kimber 1911, a Glock 19, maybe there's a new hunting rifle you've had your eye on, whatever. Head over to defendthem.com right now. Defendthem.com. You'll instantly lock in your 10 big chances to win. That's really all there is to it. Look, $1,500, that's a lot of money. And you're running out of time to sign up. All you have to do is sign up. Don't miss your last opportunity to get in on the biggest gun giveaway I'm aware of. And remember, Your 10 chances to win vanish Halloween, midnight. Don't get left behind. You'll forget about it. So go to defendthem.com. That's defendthem.com for your 10 chances to win. And check them out, by the way. It's a great organization. Defendthem.com. I've got all kinds of articles here, all kinds of new stuff going on, WikiLeaks leaks that are unbelievable, that just underscore how thoroughly dishonest and corrupt Hillary Clinton is. Hillary Clinton, we need to start referring to her as a mob boss. It is the Clinton mob family. That's what it is. And it's worse than any mafia family. You want to know why? Because they use our money, they use our government, they use power, they deceive the American people, they use the public trust to enrich themselves and enrich their buddies. It doesn't get any worse than this. It does not get any worse than this. What else can I say? What else can I say? She needs to be stopped. That whole damn Clinton mob family needs to be stopped. And in fact, they need to be investigated. And I don't need to hear any more lectures. We don't do that in America. What? We don't investigate crooks in America? There's nothing to do with politics. She's a crook. All right. I was feeling so fine there. Let's go to Ali, San Francisco, the great KSFO. Yes, sir. Go right ahead.
Hey, Mark. It's my first time calling. I'm an everyday listener.
Thank you, sir.
I live in San Francisco. I'm not a conservative, and I don't have many conservative friends out here in San Francisco.
Wait a minute. You live in San Francisco and you're not a conservative?
I know. Crazy, right? But
yes, sir.
I listen to your show every day. And
Thank
to me,
you.
I think by far you're the smartest conservative in any media, Fox News, radio, what have you. Yeah. Oh, hey, is that a bad? I hope that's not a bad thing.
No, but I'm waiting for the but.
And my question to you is, I just wanted a conservative perspective. I see a schism happening between the Republican Party right now. With there's a split between the conservatives and the Trump nationalists. Because I see Trump, he's not a conservative really in any way. He has almost no conservative viewpoints that are his own. I mean, Priebus could try to dress him up and, teach him a couple tricks, but that's...
Well, I do think he has some conservative positions. I do think he does have some of these nationalist populist positions, which in many cases are progressive positions. His position on trade really is no different than Bernie Sanders' position on trade. Mm-hmm. So I reject that. On the other hand, he supports school choice. He supports... a huge and necessary across-the-board tax cuts. He's going to attack the regulatory state, and he's listed 20 individuals, any of whom would be an outstanding Supreme Court justice. So I do see that. But if your point is there's a difference between constitutional conservatism and populist nationalism, there's no question about that. I agree with you.
Mm-hmm. So where do you think the future of the GOP lies? Because I don't
give a damn where the future of the GOP lies. I think the GOP is the Whig Party. I'm going to push the principles that I believe promote liberty and promote justice, which is what the ancients have talked about. The whole purpose of a society is to be just, that seeks to restore our constitutional system. And if the Republican Party wants to keep playing patsy, then that's their problem. I'm not about the Republican Party. I'm about the country. I'm about the constitutional system. I think the Democrat Party is hostile to all of it, and I think the Republican Party is useless. I'm just being honest with you.
Oh, I agree. I just don't know where.
We don't want the whole country to turn out like San Francisco.
I mean, yeah, you don't. I'm sure you don't. But
you know what they used to say? It's a nice place to visit. And it really is. It's a beautiful town. They got great restaurants, great hotels. But then I want to leave,
Yeah, hey, I don't blame you. We got our problems just like everybody else.
That's true. Well, Ali, I want to thank you for listening. Now, let me ask you, is there any hope in turning you into a liberty-loving American?
I love liberty. There's no conflict between that.
Well, you're a liberal. Is there any hope? Do you have an open mind or not?
I cannot see myself ever coming toward the conservative side, no. But I do appreciate your show, and I still do listen to it every day.
Well, you're a good man. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. I'm working on it. Bill, Wichita, Kansas, the great KNSS. Go.
You are working on it, Mark, and you're doing very well. Thank you so much for your service. We spoke after the president killed bin Laden, and also I mentioned to you a while back that I thought the reason that Comey didn't talk about Hillary's emails was the president was involved in it. But I wanted to say that your ideas...
And by the way, the president was, to some extent, involved in it, wasn't he? He turns out he's another pathological liar.
I described it as an enterprise to you back in July and said that that was why we weren't hearing it, and it was a crime, and it certainly is. But what I wanted to say was your Convention of the States idea is superb, and I have...
It's not my idea. I'm just giving it attention.
No, I really believe it's on the mark, and we have to do that over the long term, but there are a number of things people can do right now to ensure that we not only can see the presidential candidate we'd like to see succeed, but also to build for the election itself in the future. And one of those is to start working with young people. I go to a lot of events in Wichita here with the Republican Party, and it's like what they call a Q-tip party. You know, everybody's fairly fit looking, but they all have white hair. That isn't a good thing.
Well, at least they have hair.
Yeah, but you know what I'm saying.
I do know what you're saying. By the way, that's why I wrote Plunder and Deceit for younger people, people under 50, people under 30. That book is specifically intended for young people. Go ahead.
I hand out both Liberty Amendments and Plunder and Deceit. I would hand out other ones, but people have to be focused, and I consider those to be the ones that are most important to what we're trying to accomplish, short and long term. But we actually can take over the Republican Party better than founding another party, because if the Democrats have this easy business of pushing the Republicans out of the way, it ought to be easy for some committed people to take over, and it only takes 10, 20% to move something like the Republican Party.
Well, here's the thing: we would have to topple. We have to topple Reince Priebus. We got to break up the RNC. These state chairmen, some of whom are good, some of whom are cronies. We need to change the rules where if you're going to vote in a Republican primary, then you need to be a Republican. You cannot have, well, I don't know what I am, or I want to affect that election. That is, you don't have general elections in the states. They're supposed to be a primary process in the states. You got to get rid of the current Republican leadership in Congress, particularly Mitch McConnell, who I think really is a fraud and a phony. Things have to be done, but it's not easy to do them. It's just not. So that's why some people are saying, you know, we've tried. We gave them the majority in the House. We gave them the majority in the Senate, and it doesn't work.
Your Article 5 Convention of the States to work, the legislatures have to stay conservative. And here in Kansas, what we've had happen is Soros money is funding people who pretend to be Republicans.
They don't have to stay conservative. As a matter of fact, they just need to stay somewhat conservative. These proposals we're putting out, it's not even conservative. They're constitutionalist. And no more than that. We need 34 state legislatures to agree to a resolution to have the meeting. But I guarantee if 25, 28, 30 of them had signed up, it would get Washington's attention. I don't mean to be rude. I have to go. I have a hard break. I want to say one other thing. I have a home in a congressional district in Florida and one in Virginia. We had our buddy Brian Mast on in the program in Florida. And it's getting very close to the election. I've been monitoring the race closely in the 10th District of Virginia. I'm telling the whole nation, but particularly the people in the 10th District. The woman who's running as a Democrat is another one of these rich, radical leftists. She's the former wife of that fool former Congressman Moran. Remember that idiot Jim Moran? And if she's elected, we will never defeat her. And so Barbara Comstock, who is more liberal than I would like, but I've known her forever, I want to encourage people in the 10th Congressional District to vote for her. No, I'm not a sellout. I want to stop this Luann Bennett from getting elected. I have to live with the congressman or congresswoman who's going to be in this district. So I'm endorsing Barbara Comstock. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Explain something to me. Sites like Mediaite, I don't even know why they exist. So they're a day late, maybe 2 days late. They post what I said about Megyn Kelly and Newt Gingrich. They say what I said in the way they want to say what I said, like you can't listen to the audio on your own. You need some guy named Josh to interpret it for you. I'm going to go ahead and post that on my social site so you can see how stupid this is. He did what? He said what? Now, I spent a lot of time on that. The audio is out there. The audio is on my website. The audio is at Right Scoop. It's been there. Audio is all over the place. But over at Mediaite, they want to interpret it for you. So, just in case you don't understand what I said, and to make sure you understand what they are saying I said, I'm going to post that so you can see it. This is the example of the joke that this fellow Josh, I don't even know him, is in my view. You know, if you've ever felt like your business spends too much of its time and resources trying to recruit and hire the right people, you aren't alone. According to a recent survey by the Society for Human Resource Management, the average cost per hire is now more than $4,000, with an average of 42 days spent on filling a position. That's crazy. Now, in my audience, you folks can post for free with ZipRecruiter.com. ZipRecruiter.com. Create a free job posting in less than 5 minutes and start receiving qualified candidates as soon as today. With ZipRecruiter.com, you can post your job to 100-plus job sites, including social media networks like Facebook and Twitter, all with a single click. You find candidates in any city or industry nationwide. Just post once and watch your qualified candidates roll in to ZipRecruiter's easy-to-use interface. Find out today why ZipRecruiter has been used by over 1 million businesses. And right now, you, my listeners, you can post jobs on ZipRecruiter for free by going to ZipRecruiter.com/Levin. That's key if you want to post for free. ZipRecruiter.com/Levin. One more time, just so you can get it for free. ZipRecruiter.com/Levin. Oh, well. Oh, I see Megyn Kelly and Rupert Murdoch are kind of going at it in public. Rupert Murdoch says, look, there are 20 people who want that slot at 9 p.m. Count me out. I don't want it. And apparently, Megyn Kelly wants $20 million a year. She can get what? Maybe she can get $50 million a year. I don't know. $20 million a year? And she doesn't even play baseball or basketball or football. What's that all about? So this is my problem with the media today. These so-called journalists. I'm not talking about opinion commentators. I'm talking about so-called journalists. They draw attention to themselves. They use the quote-unquote news format as quote-unquote journalists to create drama and promote themselves. And clearly, this journalist wants her payday. No offense. No offense. Ladies and gentlemen, we salute our armed forces, police officers, firefighters, and emergency personnel, and all of you, my great audience. God bless you. And by the way, Levin TV starts in 2 minutes, and I'll see you on the radio tomorrow.
He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hello, everybody. Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811. 877-381-3811. We're going to talk a little bit this hour. I have a question to ask, talk about something that I think will both interest you and I think is important. I think most conservative intellectuals and think tanks do not actually conceive what has occurred in this country in terms of constitutional governance. They rarely talk about the Constitution. They almost never talk about solutions to the problem. They are perfectly happy operating within the box that the left has built. Massive bureaucracy, massive spending, massive debt and deficits, central government out of control, evisceration of big chunks of the Constitution. I don't think most conservative think tanks really have much to offer other than white papers about this piece of legislation or that piece of legislation. And as I try to read some of these so-called smart people in the conservative movement, they don't seem that smart to me. They want to know how we got Donald Trump. It's a fair question. I want to know how we got this government, which in so many ways operates outside our constitutional structure. I mean, I know how we got it, but they don't want to discuss it. And if you explain that a counter-revolution took place, as I've explained for years, that the American Revolution has been substituted with a counter-revolution, an administrative state, a bureaucracy, a handful of phony experts and professionals, a handful of politicians with an army of bureaucrats, thousands and thousands of laws not passed by Congress but by bureaucrats, a court that is completely out of control, nationalizing issues, mandating issues, well beyond judicial review. You discuss these things. You write about these things. That is, I do. We discuss these things. They're either rejected or ignored or said to rabble-rouse. So I read the hand-wringers, I hear the hand-wringers, and I realize the vast majority of them are just that, hand-wringers and navel-gazers. You see, we can never get our Constitution back. We can never again emphasize the importance of the individual and unalienable rights if we do not fundamentally alter what the left has done in the last century. Doesn't mean things have to be done rashly or viciously or violently or anything of the sort. But we have to talk about and recognize what's taken place. And yet, in so many ways, these so-called conservative intellectuals and think tanks have been conquered as much as anybody else by the progressive statist movement. Now, I've been talking now for years about using the Constitution to restore the Republic. That shouldn't be a radical notion among conservatives. I've been talking now for years about the state legislatures. We do believe in federalism, right? We believe in the 10th Amendment, right? Well, that the state legislature should step up, act as a group, or a big enough group, and help us put in place measures that protect us from an overly powerful, centralized federal government that has no place in our constitutional scheme. And this is said to be radical. It's only radical if you accept what's happened in the last 100 years, this counter-revolution. Now, what I'm telling you is not speculation, it's not theory, it is absolute fact. It is a fact. And this is why we are so disappointed, not only with the deceit, the shameful deceit of Republicans we send to Washington, D.C., but because they won't address these matters of basic, fundamental, founding principles. They can never do anything effective. That's why you hear Republican-friendly surrogates in media Well, we need to have the presidency to do X. We need to have a presidency to do Y. Well, okay, let's give them that. So why do we need to have the presidency? Because the president now is far more powerful than the Constitution ever intended. The vast majority of legislating takes place in the executive branch under the president. And I explained this the other day. The Democrat Party confers as much power to a Democrat president as possible. They're not interested in separation of powers. They're not interested in the Constitution. They're not interested in checking a Democrat's power. They're interested in expanding it and using the time that Democrat president has in office to make fundamental, irreversible changes to our country through the force of government. Not Republican government. Iron-fisted, top-down, centralized administrative government. This is why you've lost so much faith in our governing institutions. It's easily explained. It has nothing to do with free market capitalism or trade. It has nothing to do with, our liberty and individualism or all these. That has everything to do with what's being done to you. With what's being done to you. And in that sense, of course, liberty and individualism. My only point in that regard is, it's not like we have too much liberty or too much individualism. We have too little. It's not like we have too much free market capitalism. We have too little. We haven't really had free market capitalism for over 100 years. Now, Clarence Thomas was at the Heritage Foundation today. And in part, here's what he had to say. Cut one, go.
Your thoughts on whether there's any hope to improve the confirmation process?
There's always hope. But this city is broken in some ways. I've been here now most of my life now, and I think that we have become very comfortable with not thinking things through and debating things. That's one of the things I love about the court. You can actually talk to people about things, and I think that we have decided that rather than confront the disagreements and the differences of opinion, we'll just simply annihilate the person who disagrees with me. I don't think that's going to work. I don't think that's going to work in a republic or in a civil society. And at some point, we have got to recognize that we're destroying our institutions and we're undermining our institutions. And we're going to destroy them, but the day's going to come, if it's not already here, when we need the institutions and the integrity of the institutions. So even when you disagree with people, if you notice in my opinions, I don't attack personally my colleagues. I disagree with them strongly because I think it's important for me to leave them standing and to leave the institution standing and to sharply have the contrast and the points of view. But I don't think that's going to change in the city until we get back to sort of a notion that we argue, that we debate, that we decide things based on logic and facts and reason, as opposed to who yells the loudest or who has the best narrative or best meme or some other nonsense.
I agree with much of this, and I disagree with a little chunk of this. How do you reason with Black Lives Matter? How do you reason with a Supreme Court that turns the Constitution inside out when it comes to Obamacare, or same-sex marriage, or other issues? How do you reason with a bureaucracy we don't even know who to reason with? You see, part of the problem is that this change that's taken place over the last 100 years is not recognized. And that's why people are frustrated. And this isn't a matter of relativism, people arguing with each other, people not listening to each other. One side is advancing an agenda that is destructive of this country, and it will not take no for an answer. Another side's trying to stop it. And that side that's trying to stop it, us, we're losing. And we keep losing, even when we win elections. So I wish we could all sit on the Supreme Court and have reasoned debates and so forth and so on. But out in the streets, out in the communities, there's something that's already occurred that's extremely destructive. And in terms of undermining our institutions, these institutions, some of them, not all of them, have been undermining the civil society. You know, one of the great things about our founding is the tolerance for differences of opinion and different views. That's why we have states. That's why we have mobility. You don't like what's going on in New York? Maybe you move to Idaho or whatever. But when the central government imposes uniform requirements on every corner of the country, well, that's a problem. And one of the reasons we don't have as much civil debate and reasoning and logic going on as we should and we need is because when you change the rules, where one view is always superior to the other, and one view always has the force of law behind it against the other, reason and logic becomes very difficult. Let's go to cut 3, Mr. Producer. Go.
You said that the Constitution is not a standalone document and that it can really only be properly understood in combination with the Declaration of Independence. And I wonder whether you could elaborate on that.
Let me stop there. And in this, in my view, he's 100% correct. Go ahead.
You know, my point was that we have to understand why this was a question I was trying to answer in the mid-1980s. Why this government? Why this republic? Why isn't it something else? Why didn't we do what the French did? You know, and so I had to start with the Declaration, you know, the government by consent, inalienable rights, et cetera, and what were we protecting with the structure in our Constitution. And I think when you look at the Constitution, which is the positive document, with a declaration as a backdrop, you understand why this republic. Why is separation of powers so important? Why is federalism so important? Why are enumerated powers so important? Why a written constitution? Why is it so important? Because there's certain you gave up some of your rights in order to be governed, not all of them. And it's that limitation, the protection of that liberty. You know, I went back, I read a lot of Justice Scalia's separation of powers opinions this summer. And they all seem to come back to one theme: protecting individual liberty. It wasn't just to have separation of powers. It wasn't just to have federalism. It wasn't just to have enumerated powers. It was you had these in order to protect liberty. But where does that start? It starts in the Declaration.
That's exactly right. Was the point I was making the other day. It's the point I make in my books. The Declaration of Independence explains why we are a special country, because we embrace man's nature. That's what he's saying. So what's the purpose of the Constitution? The purpose of the Constitution is to create a governing environment that allows you to flourish, that allows you to evolve, that allows you to progress, that allows you mobility, that allows you liberty, that allows you security, that allows you justice, you, the individual, not the government, not the collective, you, the individual. And so if you don't understand the Declaration, you'll never understand the Constitution. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
So what do we do when the institutions of government are so perverted that we can't reach them through the ballot box? What do we do when so many decisions of government are made not through the will of the people, but through the will of a handful of masterminds? Whether they sit on the Supreme Court, whether they sit in the Oval Office, whether they sit in the bureaucracy, and even Congress. What do we do when the weakest of the three branches is the one that's supposed to represent we the people, Congress? What do we do when political parties confer as much power as they can on their president, and they could care less about separation of powers? What do we do when lawmaking takes place by people we don't even know, we can never vote out of office, in the bureaucracy? What do we do when our individualism is under attack? What do we do when our property rights are under attack? I'm going to answer this as soon as you return.
This is the nation's town hall meeting, and you can join in at 877-381-3811.
There have been pieces written about conservatism and conservative intellectuals and how did they miss all this and what should they do, by Ross Douthat over at the New York Times and Matthew Continetti and others, and yet they miss it. Very thoughtful pieces they write. What do we do about this populism? How did we miss it? Well, we didn't miss it. We the people. We the people. We didn't miss it. It's just that they live in such a cloistered social and intellectual environment that they're incapable of seeing it. They write to each other. They talk to each other. They write for each other. They try to impress each other. And so they miss it. They miss the genius of the founders of America. They miss the genius of the framers of the Constitution. They miss the genius of the ratifiers of the Constitution. I don't even know the last time they've read the Constitution, because many of them, I don't know about these two guys, many of them feel the Constitution is so passé as well. They have been enveloped by the progressivism of the last 100 years. I'm not saying they're part of it. I'm not saying they like it, but they're stuck in their box. They're stuck. Is this really the first time that people have faced a situation like this? No, it's not. But it is difficult to deal with. When the elected branches of government confer power on unelected branches of government, power that the unelected branches of government are not supposed to have, and one branch of government isn't even necessarily supposed to exist, and you have a party system which is about self-preservation and little else, well, what are people to do? It's not like there's this populist movement that seeks to overturn the nation. It's that people are disgusted with what the government is doing, and they don't feel they have any say in it. And in many respects, they're right. Now, we're not a pure democracy. We don't have referenda and plebiscites and so forth, nor should we. But the representative branches aren't working. And I spent some time on this the other day. I'm not going to repeat it. We know why. Because that is the plan. That was the plan of Woodrow Wilson and John Dewey And it turns out the progressive Republicans of the turn of the last century and so forth. And that's where we are. It's the plan of the Democrats. Just listen to Hillary Clinton. This is why I insist she must be defeated. By God, I don't care if you vote for a kumquat. She's got to be defeated. None of these people. I read the Dutat piece, the Continetti piece, really have a solution to all this. And, of course, there's not an easy solution to all this. But there's a direction. But they don't care about the direction. Or at least up to now, they haven't cared about the direction. So I would ask Mr. Dutat, Mr. Continetti, Mr. Crystal, Mr. This and that, Ms. This and that, to pay attention for a minute. Just for a minute. Well, maybe 15 minutes.